How's everybody doing? Nice. It's a cool format, isn't it? It's challenging, but that's what I like about it. It forces you to really focus on what you want to say, which is talking about building 10x development organizations. So I think that there's a lot of mythology around the 10x number, and there's data to prove that. We're going to talk about a study that took place starting in the late 70s, which gave us this myth, the myth of the 10x engineer. I think about these folks the same way that I think about Sasquatch, chupacabras, magical unicorns. If you believe in those things, I apologize, but they don't exist. And this book, I think, though, is the origin story for this myth. Now, in the coding war games, which this book talks about, we found that there were organizations that were 11 times as productive as the worst performing organizations in this study. So we actually found out that within a single organization, there was only about a 21% difference in productivity between individuals in that org. But there was an 11x difference in productivity between the highest performing organizations in the study and the lowest performing organizations in the study. So some of the best performers were clustering in some organizations, while others were clustering in, worst performers were clustering in others. Some companies were doing this way worse than others. But there's something about their environment and their corporate culture that's keeping even good people from succeeding. Now, what were the factors that mattered? It was not language. It wasn't even really years of experience. It was things like, is it acceptably quiet? Is it acceptably private? Can you silence your phone or your Slack like we have now? Can you divert your calls? So Dora was kind of first on the scene to start trying to measure the performance capabilities of an organization. And it looks at a distilled set of metrics that tell you various things about how the health of that organization works from a tools perspective and from a cultural perspective. But too many people focus on one single metric in Dora, and they try to improve one single metric. And then you run headfirst into something called Goodhart's Law, where when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure, right? Thank you. So DevOps and Dora and Agile have not captured all the bottlenecks and friction and obstacles to throughput. There are many that are just hiding in plain sight. And the 10x organization should consider every aspect of the developer value stream, internally and externally, which is where the SPACE framework came from. So my friend Margaret Ann Story, Peggy Story, she was the lead author on this study. A lot of other really good thinkers came up with this. We added a satisfaction element and dimension. These aren't really called metrics, these are called dimensions, to what we were doing with Dora. And that's brought us to this confluence of developer experience discipline, product management, and what we've learned from DevOps that's formed the core philosophy that we're now calling platform engineering. That's really all it is. We've taken what we've learned from DevOps, we've added these new disciplines. Now, how do we get satisfaction data? Well, no one knows more about the friction in the software development lifecycle than developers, so what if we just asked developers? Okay. And what we found is that when we phrase the questions the right way, we can look at quantitative data that tells us some stuff like PR cycle time and commit frequency. But if you also just ask developers whether they get a chance to work on small iterative changes and you sample a large enough size, we don't consider anything successful until you're at least 90%, then the data actually really starts to converge. So there's this new metric set that came after Dora and SPACE called DevX. My boss, Abhi Noda, helped to author this one along with Nicole Forsgren, who worked on Dora, and a lot of other really good thinkers. So now we have this wonderful 3 sets of metrics. They all affect one another. They create a very complicated story. They are a constellation of metrics in tension with one another. But this isn't very portable, and it's kind of hard to maintain. So the newest, most modern framework that you can use for measuring productivity and ultimately trying to help it, fix it, is the Core 4, which is a distillation of these 3 different metric sets of Dora, SPACE, and DevX. The effectiveness metric is built by the Developer Experience Index, which is a 1 to 100 normalized index following a bunch of different drivers about the systems that developers have to work within. So these are things like, is there time for deep work? How's the dev environment? So a big quandary is always, well, do I measure quantitative or do I measure qualitative, right? There's pros and cons to both of these things. But with the Core 4 metric set, you don't have to think about that. You can measure both, and you can see how the story is told about developer productivity using the confluence of these metrics. Now, I know you won't believe me, but every 1 point gain in the DXI actually equates to about 10 hours annual savings per developer when you work on this scale. And we do have the math proof, and I'm happy to talk through that. So knowing how to measure productivity, or even defining it has remained elusive. It's a very difficult problem to solve, but I really believe that the Core 4 is the best possible way available to do it now. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.